What's up guys, Rotozap here, and today we are back with another tier list video. You know, the laziest kind of videos that I can make. But no, in all seriousness, I did want to update my tier list video that I posted a few months ago because since that time there have been a lot of changes to the meta, and definitely the rankings have shaked up in terms of where the schools kind of fall in PvP. So a couple things I wanted to note though before I even get started with the video is that the PvP in terms of like how balanced the schools are relative to each other has gotten a lot better, I would say. I mean, I think that really all the schools are pretty, you know, like you can make it work with just about any school. Like some schools are just inherently a little worse than others. You might have a little more trouble getting Warlord on those characters or things of that nature. But generally speaking, the schools are pretty even. So even though obviously, yes, some schools are going to go in the okay tier, some schools are going to go into really solid and cracked or whatever that top one could mean, that doesn't mean necessarily that like the ones in okay are trash and the ones in cracked are the best or whatever. I would say that like, yes, there's a definite noticeable difference between playing an okay school and the top tier school. But in terms of like okay versus really solid or even okay versus cracked, it's not as obvious as a difference. So with that all being said, we're going to start from the lowest here, the okay schools. And controversial opinion, but I'm actually going to put Storm in the okay. So I'm not a huge fan of Storm right now. I think ever since Elf was banned, they definitely took a hit. Now, of course, they do still have access to the Beetle pet, which can give them 4 copies of that, so they can break shields pretty efficiently with that. And Storm is definitely a school, too, that you can kind of just go into Shrike and start slamming people through shields. So it's not like it's impossible for a Storm to win. And like I said, there's definitely, you know, it's not like impossible for any school really to win at this point. But I would say that Storm is kind of at the biggest disadvantage. I mean, the reasons I would cite for that is like in terms of their stats, they're kind of just a worse fire. They get worse health, oftentimes worse resistance, very comparable or equal damage. So it's kind of like there's a huge trade-off in terms of Storm is getting like worse defensive stats all around, but there's not really any like positive spin to the trade-off because it's not like they're getting better offensive stats than Fire. You know, they're kind of just a worse Fire in a lot of different ways. Though what I will say right now is there's a lot of weird cheesy strategies that you can do with Storm, like equipping a Myth Mastery and doing like a trap stack or blade stack into hit type thing. So there's a lot of weird cheesy things that you can do with Storm right now that can definitely net you some rank against people that don't really know what's going on or are maybe inexperienced. So it's definitely not unusable, but compared to all the other schools, I don't know. It doesn't. I don't really feel like putting it any higher than that. The next one on our list is going to be in the really solid tier, and it's going to be Death. Okay, so Death, I think, is a little bit better than Storm because, unlike Storm, if they're losing a match and they're really low in health, they can threaten a Scion, which is something that Storm cannot do. Like, if a Storm is just kind of down and out, right, they're just low in health, there's not really anything that they can do to, like, pressure a comeback. But for Death, it's like when you get them low, you really need to, like, secure that kill fast, because if you don't secure the kill, they will get the chance to Scion you or, you know, Shrike into Scion or something like that. And on top of that too, Death just has a lot more utility than Storm. Like for example, they have Bad Juju, they have Dark Pact for removing weaknesses. A lot of people don't play Empower on their Death, but I think it's kind of an underrated card for Death. Because if you have Pip Conserve, right, you can actually empower a Power Pip, get your 3 pips and actually conserve out of it, so it's like you're getting a free empower. So it's kind of crazy. There's a lot of different utility stuff that you can do with Death. Their biggest limitation right now is they are pretty much still a blade stack school, and obviously, you know, anyone that is a blade stack school is going to have issues against a lot of things in the meta, like you know, Storm, Myth, anyone that packs Earthquake in their TC. So they do kind of struggle a little bit. The other thing too is like the school to beat right now is Balance. I don't know if that's obvious by this tier list or not, but Death does not have a favorable Balance matchup because they require very high pip combos and high pip things, and you can't really get high pips against Balance or you get punished severely. So yeah, for those reasons, I'm putting Death in the really solid. Again, it's not a terrible school. I actually quite like Death, but it does need some more tools or better. It needs something, right? There's just something a little lacking when it comes to Death right now. So moving on to our next option here, we're gonna start moving into. I don't know if I want to move into the crack tier quite yet. This is going to be a very controversial opinion. I know it is. I'm going to put ice in the really solid. Sorry. Sorry, guys. I mean, ice is like still really good, right? They're still, again, really solid. Especially too with the motorist robe now, they can get like well over 11k health, which is a little honestly worrying, but in comparison to the fact that every school is getting more health now, it's not too big of a deal. I don't know. The ice just kind of took a hit with a lot of the things that have happened recently. A while ago, they lost all of their really good TC, like Ice Bird, Ice Elf, Polar Swarm, things of that nature. And after the Shadow Pip nerf as well, so if you guys weren't aware of that, the rate at which people get Shadow Pips was decreased severely. So, Ice can't really spam Abominable Weaver as much as it could originally. Now, is Ice only doing the same thing that it's always been doing, which is overtiming into an Abominable Weaver? Yes, it is. But but the good news is that it's a little less hard hitting, and they can't do it as often, right? So as long as you kind of play your cards right, you can usually win against ice. But they are really good though, right? Like a really good ice player is still very difficult to kill, and I could see why if you're in the comment section right now yelling at me for putting ice in really solid as opposed to cracked. I can understand why you would say that. It's just for me personally, I think there's going to be quite a few schools in cracked, and I don't want to overflow the tier, I guess. I don't know. It's really honestly more for an aesthetic that I'm putting it in really solid. But I don't know. I really do think it's kind of like bordering on cracked, kind of really solid. It has a lot of tools, but it's also very limited because your opponent knows exactly what you're going to be doing. You're just going to be, establish bubble control, have a brace up, put on some blades, and then overtime in a weaver, right? That's all you do. That's literally all you do. Oh, and also shield spam, right? But everyone's shield spamming right now in the meta, so it's not really even an ice thing anymore. But I could see why you would want to put ice and cracked if you're disagreeing with me on that. But for me, I'm going to put it above death and really solid. So now, moving into the cracked schools, okay, we're going to start things off. And keep in mind, okay, the cracked schools are all very close to each other. So even the cracked is kind of close to really solid, with the exception of death. I think death is probably notably worse. But everything in cracked is very, very close to each other. So if you have an argument for why any of the schools that I'm going to put in cracked are in a different order, I could entertain that because, again, I think they're all very close. But what I'm going to put in cracked first on the roster is actually going to be life. Okay, so if I made a tier list like 2 weeks ago, I would have put life at the very top, like the very, very top. Because they were just so difficult to beat, right? They have essentially the tankiness of ice with the addition of being able to heal. And that is a very scary and dangerous combination in PvP. But there was one change, literally one change, that knocked them down from being probably the best school in the game to like arguably fourth place, and that one change was wings, okay? Because if you guys didn't know, Wings of Fate before the change actually had a positive impact on Diego. So on top of the overtime that you're getting for breaking shields or maybe doing damage or whatever, you were also getting the really solid heal that comes out of Wings of Fate. So for those reasons, right, a lot of people were mad at Wings because it was a heal, but for some reason it was positively impacting Diego. And since it was an overtime, it was like really positively impacting Diego. But the developers actually fixed it so that it is a neutral impact towards Diego, which means it doesn't actually have a positive or negative impact towards Diego. But that one change, that one sole change, is what brought life down significantly. Because originally life was so cracked because they either just won their game by like regular means, right? They either just killed their opponent, or because of Wings of Fate and the fact that it positively impacted Diego, they could technically speaking heal spam and take things down to Diego, right? Take it down to timer, and they would usually win timer as long as they were using a bunch of Wings of Fate or intermittently hitting in between their heals and things like that. Now that Wings doesn't have any impact on Diego whatsoever, positive or negative, it's very difficult for life to win timer matchup. In fact, Dakota Earthhorn, if you guys are familiar with him, put out a tweet basically just exposing life, saying that, like, listen, we don't pack a lot of hits. Like, as long as you're using a few overtimes on us and hitting a lot, we're never going to win timer. So, and that's kind of true. Like, that is literally how things work right now for life. It's very difficult for them to win timer unless they play in a super, super aggressive way. But yeah, no, I don't know, they just don't do the damage right now, and I don't know, but there's a lot that is going for life, right? There's a lot that is going for life. The fact that they can heal, the fact that they have the second, or they're tied for having the most bubbles in the game, is also a really positive asset for them because they can always establish bubble control. But yeah, no, for all those reasons, I gotta kind of put it in cracked. I gotta take it down a notch because originally Life was such a good school because its trump card was that it would usually win Diego. So even if they were heal spamming and taking it down to Diego, they would typically still win. But now that that's not the case, I don't think that Life is nearly as strong as it was. Okay, so next up for number 3 in the cracked tier, we're going to put Myth. Okay, Myth is in such a solid place right now. Myth feels great. Like, if you have a max level Myth Wizard, I'm sure you can probably attest that Myth is super, super good right now. Especially, it's definitely one of those schools that heavily benefits from the Motorist Robe, because you can equip some pretty crazy stats now by doing that. So, and it's the same story with Fire, but we'll talk about Fire in a bit here. But no, Myth is just really solid. Like, they have so many different utility options. They have so many different pressure options as well. Like, for example, they can, as long as they have any passive damage up whatsoever, whether that be additional blades or a bubble or whatever, they're always threatening some kind of horrendous combo or some kind of way to get around your shields. For example, King Art into Yaga is the combo that we've been seeing Myth do for months, and that really hasn't gone anywhere. That is still a really good combo, and if the Myth sets things up properly so that they have, multiple stacked buffs, it's very difficult to counter a King Art into Yaga properly, right? Unless you're balanced, then you can kind of limit their pips and, do things like that. But if you're any other school, it can be kind of difficult to shut down that combo and to properly prepare for it. Like, you need triage in hand. You probably need a couple, shields on, and you might even just have to eat the Yaga, right? That's not something you don't want to do, but you might honestly just have to eat the Yaga because you don't have any other choice. And that's kind of the checkmate scenario that Myth wants, right? They want you to be so frustrated because you can't shield that you eventually just have to start taking open hits. And that's really bad, And when you combine all the stuff that they have, Minotaur, King Art, Mystic, they have so many different things. Oh, and even just Shatter, right? They just literally have Shatter learned, so they can do that as well. They have so many different ways to break your shields. It can be very frustrating to play a Myth because obviously the best defensive option in the game is a shield. But shields don't typically work against Myth unless you're, Aegising them. So yeah, no, Myth is really strong right now. It's been strong for quite a while, but I think that still definitely holds true today. Moving on, we have Fire in the Mana Burn tier. Fire, what's going on? No, so we have Fire in he's going to be the last of he or she. The Fire Wizard is going to be the last of the cracked wizards. Okay, Fire is just borderline broken right now. Fire is crazy. Like, Fire is actually crazy. So if you guys didn't know, right, after the new pack released with the Motorist Robe, I've said that word many times during this video so far, but honestly, it is a very crazy robe for specifically the Fire School, right? Fire can get basically 9.5 thousand health now with 120 something damage, like 58 resist or something like that, along with perfect accuracy, perfect pips, 30 pierce. They're not missing out on anything. Okay, they are literally missing nothing. It is all in their arsenal. It's crazy. It's actually really crazy. And the fact that the fact that Fire gets access to 2 pip overtimes like it's nothing is also a huge asset to them, right? Because right now, what Fire can do is just kind of literally sit back, put up a brace, shield, just kind of chill out, enjoy the arena vibes. And then whenever you shield or do anything that negatively impacts them, they just link, right? They just link. It's 2 pips. It does, pretty not consequential damage. Like, it does hardly any damage, but they also typically get a heal back that's like for 200 health or something about that. Like, usually after the 3 ticks of the overtime, it's about 200 health. So they're getting health back, and they're also breaking potentially 4 shields. And on top of that, they can take weaknesses off with it as well. So as long as they're like keeping bubble control and they're, providing pressure with these 2-pip overtimes and stuff, they can just shield until they get shads. Like honestly, they can just shield and then eventually shad or Ifrit when they get it. It's just that simple. Like it's really that simple. Fire right now is borderline brainless in my opinion. All you have to do is shield spam and keep your passive buffs active until you can finally get an open shot, and then you take the open shot. And yeah, it's kind of like balance in the same way that it feels like they're doing chip damage, because they're not so much like going for one shots unless they're like trap stack fire. That's an entirely different story. But the fire that I've been seeing that's doing really well, right? The fire strategy that I've been seeing work wonders is literally just chip damage, right? Because you're just doing a little bit of damage with your overtimes and stuff. And then when you can get an open shot, you take it. It doesn't kill your opponent, but it does a lot of damage. And then, you just wait. You just wait again until you can get another open shot in. And because of your just natural tankiness that for some reason fire has now, it's not hard to do that, and it's not hard to survive until you can get enough chip shots in to kill your opponent, right? And a lot of fire gear just by default gives high shad chance, so they're getting shads pretty often. So no, fire is really good right now. And I didn't even talk about trap stack, right? There's an entirely separate trap or strategy that's viable for fire right now that just involves trap stacking, right? Just trap stack into Shrike, into Brim, into Scion, right? And that is a combo that still works. It still works just fine. So if you're a fire, there's a lot of different ways to play the school right now, and you can get very, very broken stats on fire as well. So last and by definition not the least, we have balance. Okay, balance is a lot of things right now, but it's pretty broken. The thing that's crazy about balance is that they have so many different control options. They have so many different utility cards. If you play balance in like the most sweaty way, it is not hard to get ranked, like at all, right? And what I mean by the most sweaty way is just literally mana burning and empowering into more mana burns, and then shield spamming when you can't mana burn or do something else, right? And also now that balance has access to things like the golem, the pot boiler golem that gives the elemental shields, and also iron curse. It's just they have options for shield breaking. They have minion killers in the form of iron curse and chimera if they do the dragoon amulet. But there's so many different ways to play balance. But the really broken way that just involves mana burn spam is what's really crazy right now, right? And you can just use the Darkmoor deck, which gives a maximum 10 copies for balance. So you can have 10 balance bubbles, 10 mana burns, and also gazes and stuff. So you can literally have like guaranteed bubble control basically, in addition to a ridiculous amount of copies of mana burn and other cards like that. So it's really good, right? Balance is really solid right now. I don't like to put balance at the top, and I don't like to admit that it's like the most broken school right now because I am a balance main. But I will say that I am purposely playing balance in a way that is not good. I'm trying a elemental trap stack strategy on balance, which, word to the wise, is not better than just spamming mana burn. But it's fun, and I think when your school is the most broken in the game and you have the most broken combination of things, it's kind of your obligation to look for out-of-the-box strategies to play the school with, because I don't know. It's just, to me, it's not fun to just be sweaty about it and gain a bunch of rank. So these are my picks. This is how I order things. Like I said, Ice could probably be in the crack tier, and everything in the crack tier is probably interchangeable depending on who you ask. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are right now, and also just how you feel about the meta in general. Do you like where the meta's at right now? Do you dislike it? What changes would you like made? Do you think that this list is total baloney? Should Storm have 10 mana burns? Should Storm be the one with 10 mana burns? I don't know, right? That's why I want to ask you guys. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day in general, and Rotozap out. Peace.